We're back here on Jones and Company speaking with Mr. Raymond Winder today about the economy of the Bahamas. And Mr. Winder, creativity in the Bahamian economy. In order for us to really get this economy moving, we have to be creative.
Yes. Yes, that's true.
Imaginative
Yes.
and creative. We have to be about some big things.
Yes.
And I don't see too many big things. And I would say that BAMSI in North Andros is perhaps the biggest thing that we have seen in decades in this country, even though Bahamians do not know enough about it. But I visited BAMSI and I've seen it, right? But you need big things like BAMSI, eh?
Well, and my friend Mr. Enos here, you know, I mean, and that's sad that BAMSI happens to be the biggest thing that we got going for us, because the reality is there's only so much BAMSI can do.
Yeah.
It's very limited in terms of the impact that BAMSI can have.
Yeah.
And so we can't ask BAMSI to do more than what it's doing.
Right, or what it's supposed to do.
And so when you make the point, that's the only big thing, boy, that's sad for a country. Yeah, but that's the only thing we can look to right now and say, boy, that's the only thing we're doing, right?
I'm talking about at the governmental level.
I agree.
Because, you know, in the private sector, you would have Bahama, and everybody's waiting for Bahama. But there must be more to developing these islands in the archipelago than BAMSI and Bahama.
But, you know, Mr. Jones, I go back again to that point again, you know. We don't have all the answers. That is why I think you need to, you see, when you want to transform and make change, you got to do big things. And to me, big things is attracting wealth and talent. Because as Godfrey said earlier, you know, Bahamians don't like to change. We cannot, I mean, we could talk creativity and innovation as much as we want to, but the majority of us are worn out, beaten.
Even BAMSI is creating a wealth and talent.
Mr. Winder, we as a people, we had an opportunity, you know. Let me tell you, you talk about the wealth and talent. That was the numbers fellas. Okay. The numbers fellas revolutionized the numbers business.
Right.
These fellas were creative. They put it on the internet. They created a web shop. They created jobs.
That's true.
Right? And I think if you had unleashed that talent, right, these fellas, I'm sure, would have been competitors to the banking sector. That's creativity.
Yeah.
But what we do, right? What we do? We try to harness them, right?
Yeah.
And because some of our people don't appreciate change. That's what I'm talking about. But you talk about wealth and talent. Those numbers fellas had wealth and talent.
That's true. And their business, you cannot disagree with the fact that they observed what was going on around the world, and they use technology.
Yes.
And they use, you know, whatever it means. And as we see, they're being able to take that information, that knowledge now, and transfer it to other countries.
Right. And so we needed to cultivate that mentality.
Well, you know, I mean, here again, talk about moving slow. You know, we are yet still don't have a scenario as to how we're going to deal with it, because, you know, there are some concerns and there are some issues in terms of
you can work that out.
We have to work it out. But your point is well taken. I mean, there's a group.
Right.
Guess what? They're still being creative. You know, I mean, people make this. In fact, I was talking with someone today, very high-ranking person and very intelligent person. You know, people keep telling me this foolishness that the number guys, you know, have all their money in some vault. You know, you know. I said, let me tell you something. Those guys are not dumb.
Yes.
They know putting money in the vault don't do nothing for them. I agree, they got some in the vault, but the majority of their money, they're thinking of ways to get it out in the economy.
Yes.
And guess what? The reality is they're doing a better job of churning money in this economy and some of the financial institutions.
Well, tell me, Mr. Winder, and I'm glad you said that, because there are some people who believe that we have a parallel kind of banking system going on, where the banks, the commercial banks, are doing some lending. The web shop owners are also lending and developing. I understand they're giving mortgages in some cases. But doesn't that cause a problem in the economy of the Bahamas and in the money supply of the country?
No, they're recirculating the money.
You answer the last question. I don't think it's a problem in money supply. Now, the concern
Money supply, insofar as there are some people who believe that you can be laundering money.
But that's a different issue. That's the point I'm going to get to.
And there are banks that are still not prepared to take money from the web shop owners. Yes?
Well, I think that still is an issue, and I think that is a concern because you have an industry that is not regulated, and it should be regulated because you do have the potential for those organizations to launder money, and that is a concern. That is a regulatory concern, and that is something that we need to fix because it has a bigger impact and a bigger concern over the financial services sector. And so we need to put in place the proper structure to ensure that isn't happening.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay, so that's one problem. That's important, and we need to do that. We need to do that as fast as possible because we don't want the perception to be out there, whether it's actually happening or not, that the possibility exists that these institutions, these unregulated institutions, could be used to launder money. Because now we really got challenges and problems on that. So we need to fix that. But now, in this question about parallel banking, as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Jones, they have decided that, look, we're not going to view the entire Bahamian marketplace as being
The province of the banks.
unattractive to do lending. Okay, we are going to not require maybe not as much profit, but we're going to allow our monies to be loaned at, let's say, 6% or 7% instead of 8 or 9%. So we're going to now make some things happen. And so
that's a parallel banking facility.
Well, it's
parallel.
Well, it
runs parallel to the structured the commercial banks.
Regulated institution.
No, I say it's an alternate. I don't call it parallel.
But if you are able, Mr. Eneas, to use a card and transfer funds,
that's a different. Now that's parallel banking.
That's parallel banking because that is what is happening. Your relative in Inagua can access funds from your web shop account in New Providence.
I call innovation.
It is innovation.
It is innovative, but at the same time, it runs parallel to your regular banking system.
See, the big difference that people forget is that they're using their money. They're not using other people's money. And that's the big difference between a bank and them. The bank is using other people's money. They are using the funds that they've earned, illegal or whatever, and they're managing that. And there's nothing wrong with any individual that has excess funds to seek to try to get a return on those funds by either through equity means or through debt means.
Yeah, but we have a Securities Commission, for instance, that must be concerned about certain issues in the country. And where is the Securities Commission and Central Bank in all of this? Because you're talking about B dollars
but Mr. Jones,
moving about in the economy. Mm-hmm. Some people are selling mortgages. Mm-hmm. Some people are giving car loans and all the rest of it. But there has to be some regulation when you are moving hundreds of millions of dollars in your economy.
If I have $20 million, who's supposed to tell me how I should deploy my $20 million? If I would have loaned Randall $1 million, Mr. Enos $1 million, that's my $20 million. The problem comes in is now if I have 20 millions of George's money and Enos, now that needs to be regulated. But if I decide to give you a loan at 2% because you're my friend,
that's your business.
And I decide to charge Enos 9% because I don't like what he's doing, That's what I want to do. That's my money. I can do what I want to do. Why you got to regulate that?
And so that shouldn't be
You
regulated.
think why you should regulate that?
No regulation should
On
take.
my money. And me using my money to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
Why you want to regulate that?
Yes. Okay, fine.
But the other fact is,
But what does that do to the banking system? What is the impact of all of that on the banking system? If you
Well,
have,
let me
if
tell
you
you-
have 20 very wealthy people doing that in your economy,
But let me tell you what's happening in the economy from the banking sector. And let me tell you how the economy is responding to the fact that the bank has become more stringent in terms of providing facilities to institution. If you're an organization, right, and if you have the asset and you have the earnings capacity, instead of going to the bank, you see Cable, you see Sunshine, you see all of them. They don't go to the bank. They draft a necessary document, and they say we go to the marketplace. We want to raise $20 million, and we're prepared to pay 5%. And people, because the banks aren't paying them any money, they say, hey,
Yes.
I'll take a 5%. Mr.
deal.
Jones is so good. It is so good for the companies today who really have the capacity. A lot of them are actually reissuing their debt. They have a debt with a bank at 7%. They say, man, why should I pay 7%? They go to the market and say, I'm prepared to pay 5.5%, and the market takes it up. So that's what's happened. So there's always responses to what the bank is doing in the marketplace. The bank can't just sit there and do nothing, because the marketplace will respond. Now, it will not respond as fast, but it will respond. So you have that response where companies are, in fact, ignoring the banks and actually getting direct funding from the marketplace.
Hence-
and then you
Yes.
have individuals.
hence the cost of doing business with banks, and hence the cost that banks charge customers in the Bahamas. So the cost of banking
Yeah.
has gone
It's
up.
going up, yes. Yes, because
Right?
now the bank needs to find other ways to generate fees.
Right. The other fact is, let's get back to the $20 million you have.
Right.
Right. The Bahamian people say they don't want you. They don't want to regulate you.
Man,
That's what the Bahamian people.
No, let's differentiate
No.
now.
That's what the Bahamian
There's
people.
two issues here.
Yeah,
I agree now. Let's make clear now. You should be regulated on how you earn money.
The Bahamian people.
Yeah, right. You should
the
be
Bahamian
regulated.
people. The Bahamian people
Right.
told the Bahamas government,
Oh,
right, they do not want to regulate how X number of fellas earn their money. That's what the Bahamian people say.
Yeah, that's not good.
Huh?
Yeah, but
That's not good.
But
That was it. But that's what the people say.
I understand.
Yeah.
I disagree with the people,
Yeah.
but I voted for regulation. But we live in a democracy.
yeah, but by the same token, but there are a good number of people who said that, who really want these web shops closed.
Closed down.
I don't know what the
Okay.
situation.
No,
All I
no,
know
no,
is what
that's
the
the issue.
results.
No, but that
with
they
the-
want it
with-
closed.
with-
Right.
with the results.
Okay.
No,
That's
you
the
can't
issue.
talk that. No, the people had an opportunity to express themselves.
Yes, but at
and the
the
people
same-
say they don't want the thing regulated. I said I want it regulated.
But
right?
extrapolate from that
Right.
too,
What they
that
meant.
they want web shops closed.
Closed. Yes.
No, I don't
Don't be-
extrapolate.
don't try to be cute.
I don't extrapolate. I don't extrapolate that. I extrapolate that they don't want it regulated. They want it open. That's what I extrapolate. Because I can't think. I gotta see what the face value of this thing is.
But you must-
You had an opportunity to say no and regulate it. You say no, don't regulate it. Leave it as it is.
No,
What is- what-
no. They didn't say leave it as it is.
What
because,
they said?
Because there were quite a number of people who said that it ought to be they ought to be
Mr. Jones.
closed.
Mr. Jones.
All right, we know that, right? So no,
Mr.
don't
Jones.
strain the point.
No, I'm not straying the point. I am going by some people say they didn't understand what it meant, and because they didn't understand what it meant, they voted
But
no.
you're using conjecture here.
I use no conjecture.
That's
You heard that too
That's
on your program.
That's conjecture. But
No,
let-
you
let-
heard that
let-
too. That people didn't understand that the way the question was framed was wrong.
Okay, all right.
You didn't hear that?
Yes, let's move on. Mr. Winder, VAT.
Yeah.
There is a view that it's going to be harmful to the overall economy of the Bahamas. That will be a drag on the economy. It will be harmful to the Bahamian economy. What is your view?
Well, let's clear up the issues, because there are a number of issues when we talk about VAT. Let us look at taxes in a general sense. Whenever the government takes taxes from the marketplace and use that money to pay off debt, the economy contracts.
Yes. Okay.
That's just what it is.
Okay.
Let's say what it is.
So you expect
taxes,
you expect a contraction
To some
of
degree.
the Bahamian economy
Just-
as a result of that.
to some degree, unless you have growth that's able to now compensate for that particular loss from the economy. But if you don't have the growth, then that's what will happen. So that's a general thing, and it doesn't matter whether it's VAT, income tax, any kind of tax. A tax is a tax. Okay. Now, let's look at VAT the way it is. Okay, VAT is a consumption tax, and it's a broad tax, and it does have the ability to be able to get funds from a broad sector of the economy. Clearly, individuals at the bottom end of our economy have some concerns and some issues, and so government needs this in order to ensure that those individuals do not fall between the cracks, ensure that we have some programs to assist those individuals, so that those of us who can pay can actually pay. But my concern about our governments, and government today and the government in the past, is that we do not pay enough attention to the current tax legislations that we currently have on our books. They are not yielding the kind of revenue that they should yield. And the one that's the most vexing for me is real property tax. Okay? Now, I understand that the government may have some concern that individuals with a property less than 250, 300, whatever the number the government wants to make it. So if you have a property of 300,000 or less, you will be exempt. I understand it. Now, having established 300,000 as the benchmark, I expect the government to collect all taxes over 300,000. I think it is wrong for the government if Ray Winder has $1 million house, and because Ray Winder is not making the kind of money that Ray Winder used to make, that now I should be exempt from paying real property tax. No, I think I should do the best thing. I think I should downsize. But as long as I'm holding $1 million house, I think Ray Winder, should pay real property tax on that. Okay? Now, to give you a clear perception of how delinquent our governments have been relative to collecting taxes, real property tax happens to be the most easiest tax in the world to collect. Why? The properties don't move. It's not like goods. Fella bring it in and sneak it in and you can't find it and you don't know where it is, or he tells you that it's $100 when in fact it's $200. Real property don't move. You can find it what the value was yesterday. You can find it what it is tomorrow. Okay? And so why it has been so difficult for our governments to put in place the proper policies and procedures to ensure the collection of real property tax tells you how delinquent our governments have been relative to making Bahamians accountable for their taxes. Okay? Now, if we think 250,000 is too low or 300,000, we'll raise it. To me, it doesn't matter. If you think the rate should be 4%, 5%, it does to me not. But once you have set the baseline, let's go with it. And those Bahamians who insist on not paying their taxes ought to be dealt with. Now, in the United States, if you own a piece of property and your taxes is $1,000, the U.S. government doesn't worry about it, whether you pay or not. Because what they will do,
Put a lien on it.
the lien is already on the property. Our government already has a lien on the property. All real property tax has a lien. If you sell a property, the first person gets paid is the government. So there's a lien already. Now the problem is what you want to do, that you have a lien. What they do in the USA, no problem. But we have Mr. Jones over here. He has $1,000. The government needs that $1,000. They can't wait. Okay, Mr. Enos doesn't want to pay his taxes. So guess what, Mr. Enos? Until you pay your taxes, the rate on that bill is 15%, 20%, and some states it's 35%. Now, Mr. Jones said, hey, that's a pretty good investment. So here, Mr. Government, you want $1,000? Here's your $1,000, Mr. Government. I, Wendell Jones, will take the risk of that lien that you have on the property. If Mr. Enos doesn't want to pay, eventually he will pay because Mr. Jones now has the capacity to sell your property. Very simple. Government doesn't have to spend $1 in the process, right, and to collect the taxes. Now, you can tweak it and do a lot of different things to this, but this nonsense that we currently have now is just a disaster. We might as well, I don't know what we should call it, because that is a bastard child of real property tax. When you compare real property tax around the world in terms of how it's dealt with. But, and to me, if the government is real serious about taxes, they ought to fix that. Now, make up their mind what they want to do, but fix that.
I want you to elaborate now on VAT.
Okay.
And how it will impact the economy. And you did say it will cause a contraction of the economy. There are some purveyors of gloom who say that it will also increase poverty. You go that far?
Well, Mr. Jones, it's hard. I don't believe them. I don't believe the amount. It all depends on the kind of programs that the government has in place. Clearly, if the economy contracts, a number of things can happen.
Do you see VAT as being necessary at this time?
Of course, I see VAT as necessary. But like I said before, I think the government needs to really do a better job of existing taxes and so forth. Because I think
but you explain that point, and I think most people will agree with that.
Let me just make this point. We cannot, as a country, continue to have the level of deficit that we have had in the last 5 years, because we cannot afford for our debt to continually grow at that rate.
Okay.
So we need to make major inroads into that.
Godfrey Enos has a question for you. Let's take this break here. This is Jones & Company, and we are speaking with Ray Winder today. We'll come right back.